Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana. And we're here today with special guest, Jeffrey Stevens. And he's here to share with us his new book, Enemies Among Us, a Nick Reagan Thriller. So are you looking for a book that you just can't put down? Well, this series is one you'll want to pick up. So Jeffrey Stevens is a highly successful attorney in private practice in Connecticut. In addition to The Handler and Enemies Among Us, he is also the author of the Jordan Sandor thrillers, Targets of Deception, Targets of Opportunity, Targets of Revenge, and Rogue Mission, as well as the Anthony Walker Murder Mystery Crimes and Passion, and the Pencraft First Place Award-winning novel, Fool's Errand. So welcome to the show, Jeffrey Stevens.
Thank you so much for having me.
What an honor it is to have you here and to talk about this new book. I've got to tell you, this book really intrigued me. What inspired you to write this?
Well, this is, as you and I have talked, this is the second book in a new series that I began during the pandemic. And the first book was sort of an attempt by me to get myself off the couch. I wanted sort of a globe-trotting adventure because I thought that might be fun for people because we were all shut in and you know how that whole thing went. And that did well. And so when I decided to write another book in the series, I thought I'd like to do something a little bit more on the domestic side because I felt there really are issues, what's going on in our government, what's going on, and this is not a right or left issue, this isn't liberals and conservatives or anything like that. It's really what's going on in our country, and I thought that it might be interesting to examine that because normally when you have these espionage novels and, you know, they're all about the CIA, it's usually the same thing. I hate to say it, but, you know, Goldfinger wants to corner the market in gold, or somebody in another James Bond movie wants to take over the world, you know. And I thought, no, let's make this a little bit more real, and let's make it about, as the title says, the enemies among us. And so my star, Nick Reagan, and his partner, Carol Gellos, find themselves confronted by issues they never thought they would have to confront within the government, the CIA, big business, big pharma, and so on. And so I got excited about that, and the book really was, of the books that I've written, this was one of the easiest ever to write because it just kind of flowed.
Now, did you do a lot of research for this book?
Yes, always. I always do a lot of research, as I've said many times to friends and fellow writers and so forth. People today are so sophisticated. People, you know, it's just a different world. You know, you look back at some of these, and this is going to seem like a silly example to give, but, you know, way back when in early television, you had guys like Gene Autry, who was a cowboy hero. And, you know, he was this paunchy, middle-aged guy. And don't get me wrong, I love Gene Autry and Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, but you had him beating up 17 bad guys in one fight and all that. People aren't going to put up with that anymore. People know what's going on in the world. They want to be entertained, but they also want to be engaged. They don't want their intelligence to be insulted. So I have a really strict policy about I don't write about scenes in restaurants or settings where I haven't been, with very, very rare exception about countries that I couldn't get into. I don't write about countries overseas that I haven't visited and scenes that I haven't witnessed and so forth. So the answer is yes, I do a lot of research. I have had people who have helped me from the intelligence community, and so I am very proud. I know that I don't want to sound arrogant or anything, but I think this helps readers. I'm proud of the authenticity of the books. And I'll tell you one quick funny story. In one of my earlier novels, I had this gentleman who had been in the military and he'd been in law enforcement, and he helped me vet my books when they were done just to make sure that I wasn't saying anything that wasn't true and so on. And so there's this critical kind of fight scene towards the end of the book where the hero of that book has a gun battle, so to speak, with some villains. And he calls me up. He's furious because in the weapon that the hero was using, I had him fire the gun 7 times, and that gun only carries 6 bullets. So I
Oh
had to go back
no.
and rewrite the scene. So yeah, I'm pretty fanatical about making sure that what I'm saying can be real, and so that I think makes it more exciting for the reader.
So those people in the CIA, when they pick up your book and read it, they're gonna go, "Oh, okay, this makes sense."
Yes. I truly hope so. Um, I had a very good friend years back, and I'm sorry to say he's now gone. He was in the military. He was a Green Beret and a very decorated officer. And later on, he got into corporate life, but he actually went to work for the CIA. And I found that out quite by accident one night. And so after that, I said, "Oh, come on, you've got to share some things with me." And he said, "Well, I'm not going to give you any, state secrets or anything like that." But he did give me context. And so I based my CIA characters largely on the experiences that he shared. And when the first couple of them were published, he came to me and said, "You're going to get me in trouble on the fifth floor at Langley because, I can't tell these people that I know you. They're going to say, 'What kind of information are you giving out?'" But in reality, he was kidding. And it's not like, as I say, he shared anything inappropriate. But I did learn a lot about how these people operate. And of course, as we all really know, and when I talk about the sophistication of readers, it's fun to see a spy like James Bond, where it's all about tuxedos and martinis that are shaken and not stirred. But in reality, these people sacrifice a great deal. Marianne, they live in the shadows. They live secret lives, even from those closest to them in many instances. They put in incredible hours. They expose themselves to danger, and they have the patience of Job because so much of their business is waiting. It's just so much waiting until things pop. And so I really respect them greatly, and that's why I always like to make sure that I respect the characters that I'm writing about. As much as I like to make them real, I have to respect them as well.
So was Nick Regan based off of your friend then, more or less?
Uh, 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 Less more than more. The first character in the series that I wrote about a character named Jordan Sandor, those four books are really based on my friend. Nick comes from some other people that I've met along the way as a result. And so he's a little bit more iconoclastic. He's also far from perfect, unlike some spy thriller heroes. Bullets don't bounce off him. He doesn't beat up six people at one time. He's more a real human being. He's got real relationships. He's not running around sleeping with 1,000 women. I mean, he's got a girlfriend that matters to him, and so forth. And so he's a very empathetic character, I think, and he's a lot of fun. He's got a great sense of humor. He gets himself in trouble all the time, and in fact, in any Enemies Among Us, there's no spoiler alert because it says this in the synopsis, is that when the book starts, he's trying to track down this terrorist who got away, and suddenly he finds that there are people in the hierarchy who are telling him to back off that mission. And he doesn't understand why, and so he defies the instructions of his superiors to go and find this person because he knows that it's important that he does that. And he's a patriot. And so it's fun to follow him as he does these things, and as those closest to him support him because they know he's a little bit of a loose cannon, but it's always for the right reason.
Yeah, when we do something that's right, it's not always popular.
That's so true. That is so true in all facets of life, in all facets of government. Sometimes, it's easy to do the popular thing. It's difficult at times to do the right thing, and that's why I think that people respond to this character Nick Reagan and to his partner Carol Gellos because they really are devoted to what they do to each other, to protecting our country. I mean, there are so many things. And when I came out with the first book in the series, as I mentioned, going back to that one, my publisher said, this terrorism thing, it's not as hot a commodity as it used to be, and so forth. I said, you know what? I know for a fact that there's a great deal of danger to us as a result of terrorists, and that we are just doing a great job in the intelligence community and keeping a lid on these things. Well, P.S., after I wrote that book, now look what's happened in the Middle East, and we're on the brink of a world war due to terrorists such as Hamas and Hezbollah and so forth. And, these things are real every day, and these people are protecting us every day, and they deserve the credit for that. And that's why I have fun writing the books.
So tell us a little bit about the title, Enemies Among Us. So where is that coming from?
Well, that's obviously from the sense that as Nick and Carol proceed along the way, along their journey to do what they're trying to do here, they discover that some some forces that are working against them are not external but internal, both within the bureaucracy and within big business. I mean, let's face it, a lot of this country, I mean, we talk about politicians and the senators and the congressmen and the congresswomen and the president and all of that, but who runs this country? Big business runs this country. Big pharma runs this country. It used to be that oil was the biggest thing, but right now we're ruled by intelligence, the people who run all these big intelligence companies. I mean, who's really running things here? Who do the politicians answer to, whether it's Meta or Apple or Amazon or what have you? And I'm not saying these people are evil. I'm just saying that's the reality of the situation. So I wanted to delve into that a bit and see, there are bad guys and there are people who are trading for their own accounts, and those are the enemies who are among us, the people we think are on our side and they're not.
Well, I love in the description of your book, it talks about it, it's got it all: spies, assassins, guns, and terrorist cells. And I know that's something that's really on people's minds right now.
Yes, especially with what's going on in the southern border, we have let, and I'm not blaming anybody in particular, I'm just saying that we've let millions of people in not knowing who they are, and we've already identified so many of them as being on the terrorist watch list. I mean, I hate to say this, and I hope it never comes to pass that another tragedy occurs in this country, but we have to recognize that these people do not mean us well. People are jealous of the United States of America. They have a different agenda, and many times they want to hurt us. And I mean, look at what happened in New York City when these people who were migrants came in, beat up New York City police officers, were let out without bail, and then tried to scoot cross country. I mean, this is some horrible stuff, and so we have to be mindful of what's going on, and that's why the intelligence community is to be praised for all the good things they do. And in this administration and in prior administrations, they've really got their eye on the ball, because we can't afford to allow the sort of things happen to us again that have happened in the past.
I've heard many times people talk about we can no longer kick that can down the road. It's something that we have to deal with here and now, because it's a situation that's just not going to end otherwise.
That's very well said, Marianne. That's the problem. And without getting too political about it, I mean, there are countries out there. We know who the new axis of evil is. We know these countries don't like us. I mean, they're attacking us as we speak, and they're using their surrogates to do that. And we keep saying we don't want to be in a world war, nor should we want to be in a world war, but we also have to protect our own. And there's a lot of danger out there that has to be addressed. And some of it, as I say, comes from people who want to build their own companies and who want to build their own wealth and their own power and so on. And it's very important to recognize the sacrifice that they make and the contribution that they give to our safety. While we're sleeping in bed safely in our homes, these people are out there and they're fighting wars we don't even know about. So it's good to read about it if you've got a hero to root for and you feel good about it. And I that's what I try and provide. I try and entertain. I try and inform, and I try and make it exciting and real, because that's what's going on in the world.
Do you also have the reader, when you're writing, kind of in many ways start asking questions about how things are right now?
I hope so. I mean, I think the best readers are the most intelligent readers, and therefore the most curious readers, because I think intelligence and curiosity goes hand in hand, as we know. And so when people are asking things, I don't mind if they say, boy, could this really happen? Or is that something that we're really facing? Or did this character act correctly? I think that's great stuff. And, if I falter, then I take the blame, because I want things to work. I was asked back when about, building characters. And one of the interesting things that I found when I first started writing novels 100 years ago is that, your characters really do take on their own life. And so if you have a character who is just a completely honest person, let's just take somebody like that, like some people I've known in life who really couldn't tell a lie if there were a gun to their head. And now you've got them in the course of the story, and suddenly you want them to lie. And as you're writing it, you feel this resistance, and you say, no, that Lady Mary, she could not have told that lie. And so you just know that it's not consistent with the true character, and so you move on. And so I like when people are reading because they know what to expect. Like, for example, Nick Reagan and Carol Gellos are partners. And the obvious thing, because, this always happens, it's been happening in movies for 100 years. It was happening on all these TV shows, anything from Moonlighting with Bruce Willis and so forth on down the line. But I was determined that they were never going to be romantic together, that Carol is as tough as Nick, and that they're doing a job, and the whole idea that, suddenly they could fall into bed together and have a romantic liaison and all the rest of that. I said, no, that's not what I want. I want to respect these people, and I want Carol to be as strong as Nick, because if you've noticed, in espionage novels and movies, there's rarely a woman who's a truly strong character. If they have a woman and she's strong, she's usually, like sort of almost a superhero. She's out to lunch, and, instead of being someone who's just really dedicated to her job and does it well. And that's what I wanted to create in Carol. And Carol was based on a real person who served in the military and then went on to, become a wife and a mother and have a different career. But I tell you what, when the chips are down, she's tough as nails, and that's how I wanted to build Carol.
I am so glad you did that. And I love how you're bringing just this whole nuance to it. And it's interesting. I'm sure many people who are in the CIA, FBI, they're looking at this going, gosh, this is how it really is. Not everyone's falling in love and what have you. Each person has their own family and stories that they're going home to.
Yeah, this is not not some ongoing party. And number one, number two, these are life and death issues. So you've got to know that, as the expression goes, that your partner has your six. I mean, you have to know that they're behind you and they're going to support you, and that you can't let these other things get in the way, because it just doesn't work. And it's great in movies and books when they do that. And I'm all for romance. Listen, I'm a huge rom-com fan. If You've Got Mail comes on, I can almost not resist seeing it again. but when you're writing about espionage and you're writing about these things, I'm not saying there's not humor in the book, and I'm not saying there isn't romance, but you also have to be reasonable about how these people behave, because after all, as I say, there's life and death involved, which is unlike most professions. Lawyers, accountants, stockbrokers don't really deal with that at any given moment, and these people deal with it as a reality of everyday life.
I think it brings a greater appreciation to our, our men and women in uniform as well. Because, I mean, we expect so much of them. And to
Yes.
be able to read a book like this and really get a different perspective, what a gift that is.
Yeah, and I hope so. On the other hand, I want to be careful because I never want to be too preachy. I have a gentleman who helps me plot my books, and he's always scolding me about that. He said, if I get too preachy about something, he says, no, you can't be doing that. No, that you really can't. You got to get back to the story. You've got to let people enjoy the story. Don't be making speeches. And so I'm constantly trimming those things and trying to make these things as compelling as they should be. I mean, these books, Enemies Among Us, as anyone who's read it will say, it is a page turner. The intention here is that as you've come to the end of every chapter, you cannot wait to get to the next one. And so don't start reading this book at 10 o'clock at night, because you're not going to get much sleep, because I really believe that you're going to want to know what happens next. And there are enough characters and subplots that run through this that it's going to keep your attention and your interest, or at least that's what I'm striving for. I don't want to sound like, I'm the greatest thing in the world, but it is what I've strived for in this book, and the reactions I've gotten are very positive, that's what it does. You've got these books have got to be, as I say, page turners. They've got to be exciting, suspenseful, thrilling, because that's what you want. And you want physical action, you want interplay between the characters, and that's what I try and provide while I take you on this journey.
Now, when you were doing your research, was there anything that really kind of stuck out and surprised you?
Yes, actually, and I don't want to give too much away about a subplot, but there is, in the course of the book, I'll say this, I guess this won't ruin too much, but there is a poisoning that occurs in the book. And I was staggered about how that could be done and how it came to pass and so forth. And I did a lot of research. I worked with a couple of doctors. I worked with a person who had been a victim and survived it, had survived this type of poisoning. And so it was really quite fascinating to me. And it got me into this whole thing about big pharma as one of the segments of our business community that really is, they've got to be looked at. I mean, whatever your position may be on taking vaccines and boosters and stuff, one way or the other, let's face facts. Big pharma made a fortune from the pandemic. There's no denying it. I mean, they don't deny it. It was unbelievable, and they got these things approved so quickly, without knowing exactly what side effects there may be long term, but it didn't matter because we needed it, and I agree with that, and I think it's wonderful, both in the Trump administration and then in the Biden administration, that they provided this for people in this country, but they made a lot of dough. And right now, there are things going on the same level. Like, for example, I don't know if you have any friends who are obese. I hope you don't. I do. And this stuff about Ozempic and Wegovy and so on, it is so expensive. It is just so expensive, and insurance doesn't pay for it for a lot of people who really need it, who really need to lose that weight. And I'm not getting on a soapbox about that. I'm just saying that these are things that can help people. And on the other hand, Big Pharma, they're taking their money out of it, and they make a lot of money. Now, they have a great argument, which is, if we don't make huge profits from these new medications, then how can we continue to do research and development to find new ones? Okay, within reason, that's fair. But the numbers out of the pandemic, if you've looked at them, are staggering. They really are staggering. So they certainly didn't get hurt financially by what happened, while the rest of people in the country, they were out of work, we couldn't leave our homes, kids couldn't go to school, and so forth. And so I just was fascinated by that, and it all came from this subplot about this poisoning, and it all germinated from that, if you will. And so in answer to your question, that's in my typical long-winded fashion, as I say to my friends, I'm a novelist, I'm not a short story writer, but in my long-winded answer is, yeah, that came as a surprise to me, and all the information that flowed from that was fascinating. I hope readers find it so.
Oh, there's so much fascinating stuff coming about that. And to have that interwoven in your book, I am just absolutely thrilled. And I think it's such a great piece because a lot of people have questions about that nowadays. I mean, they just had a congressional thing with some of the big pharmas in regards to why does some medications cost so much here in the US and in Germany and other countries, they're barely paying anything for the same medication.
Yeah, yes, and on top of that, Marianne, in many instances, I'm not going to say in every one, but in many instances, we created the medication here in the United States. So we did all that R&D, and we went through that whole FDA approval, which is a tough process because they're supposed to keep us safe, and so that's good, and I'm glad they do that. And now in Europe, it's cheaper. I had a friend, this is a crazy aside, and folks, I'm sorry, I'd love you to buy my book, but I'm just going to tell a quick story, that I had a friend who needed a tooth implant, which many people get. It wasn't like a whole thing of dentures. He just had one bad tooth and had to have root canal and tooth implant. He went on vacation to Eastern Europe, and the amount of money that he saved on the dental bills paid for the entire vacation. He had the work done over there. Isn't that
Wow.
amazing?
Wow.
I mean, he said, yeah, I'm trying to remember now. I don't think, maybe it was Prague, but anyway, he said it was a beautiful city. I'd never been there. I got a recommendation. This dentist turned out to be great. I spent a week there. I saw him 3 times during the week. Bing, bang, boom, as they say. It was all done. He came back, and it didn't cost him any more than if he had had the work done here. So there's something that needs to be looked at. I'm not saying, I'm a capitalist. I believe people should be allowed to make money, but there should be a rule of reason. And so some of that in Enemies Among Us, we address some of that and how these people operate, because when they go over the line, that's when they've got to be made to answer for it, as you said, in such as these congressional hearings.
Well, and my goodness, your background is so fascinating. Why don't you share a little bit about that with us? Because I mean, here you are, attorney by day and best-selling author at night.
Well, thank you. Yes, I'm not so much an attorney by day as much anymore. I'm sort of like, I'm about 50-50 now between practicing law and writing. But I always wanted to be a writer. And when I was a young person, I was about to go off to college. I'm a Penn State Nittany Lion for anyone who cares. And when I was about to go off to college, my dad, and we were of, let's say, of reduced circumstances, or to put it more bluntly, we were poor growing up. And I was the first person in my entire family to go to college, and my extended family, and everybody was very excited about it. And my father said, "What do you want to do? You're going to college." I said, "I want to be a writer." And he looked at me like he had just eaten a bad oyster and said, "Listen, son, here's the reality of writers. Writers rarely make any money. I mean, there are a few of them, and we all know who their names are nowadays, but writers rarely make money, and generally they drink too much." So he said, "I'll tell you what, if you want to write, you keep writing, but if I'm going to pay for your college, you go off and do something else you can make a living at." So my second choice was to be an attorney, because in those days there were a lot of TV shows about lawyers that I found interesting. Whether it was, I'm trying to remember them, L.A. Law, and this is well after Perry Mason. I don't go that far back, but L.A. Law. There was something called The Defenders was on the tail end of that show, and so forth. So I said, being a lawyer would be pretty interesting, and so I went to college, and then I worked my way through law school. And I became an attorney, and I went into private practice because I still wanted to write. And it's difficult if you're a partner in a firm to say, "I really don't feel like looking at that legal brief today because I want to write this story." So I worked for myself and got clients, and I was very fortunate among the clients that I've had. But I continued to write. And about 20 plus years ago, I was out with someone, and he introduced me to this other gentleman, and he said, "By the way, you guys should really talk, because, Jeff writes novels, and he's never gone to get one published, and you're a literary agent." And this gentleman's name was Bob DeForio, and we became friendly, and he said, "Well, let me take a look at what you have." And so I had this one book that I swore, I was sure this was going to be my ticket to stardom, and he loved it, and he couldn't get it published for love or money. And he said, "What else have you got?" And I said, "Well, I've got this spy novel, and it's really based on this friend that I have who pretended not to be a spy and really was, and it's called Targets of Deception." He said, "Well, let me look at that," and he sold it right away, and I was off to the races. And so Enemies Among Us is my 8th published novel, and so that's how it all came to pass. But as my father would have said if he were still around, "I'm glad you did that, but I'm still glad that you had a law career so that you could afford to raise your children and live a nice life."
Well, and I understand what you mean, because I mean things have changed so much over the years. People are creating different career paths, but to
Oh,
be
yes.
able to follow your dreams like you did, I mean, how inspiring is that?
Well, it's great. I say to everybody, look, never, ever, ever give up your dreams. As a young kid, I mean, when I was in elementary school, I wrote puppet shows. When I was in middle school, I wrote plays. I mean, I always wrote, and I always dreamed that one day I'd have a book published, and now I've got 8 of them published. So never give up your dreams, because that's what life is about. It's who you're meant to be. And I realize people have to make a living. I'm not naive. And as I say, I came from a poor family where earning money was very, very important as I moved into my adulthood. And because no one was there to support me, it wasn't like I had a trust fund or some safety net. But it's so incredibly important not to give it up. I'm a big fan of the motivational speaker Tony Robbins that everybody knows, and he is such a proponent of that. Like, identify your dream and make sure that you pursue it, because otherwise you're not going to feel satisfied and happy in life. I mean, because once you do these things, even if you're not, look, I'm not on the top of the bestseller list, but that's okay with me. I just love it. People buy my book, they read it, they get in touch with me, and they tell me how much they enjoyed it. It doesn't get any better than that for me. And so that's what I say to everyone. Go do it, whatever it is, even if you have to do it in your spare time, or as you say, I was a lawyer in the day and a writer at night. However you have to do it, whether you want to be an actor or a sculptor or a musician or whatever. I don't care if you want to be a paleontologist. Make sure that you don't give up on that dream, whatever your circumstances.
I just love that. I absolutely love that. And so it has me thinking, my goodness, I've got more questions than we have time. So we're definitely bringing you back to talk about the first book in the series. But
Thank you.
yes. But is there another book that's coming after this book? I know books are such a journey.
Yes, they are a journey. I'm working on it. This is going to sound like you're kidding me, right? But what I did was, in the midst of all this, I had this other idea, and so I wrote a book about a young lawyer. Having been a lawyer, I never really came out with a book about a lawyer, but I wrote a book about a young lawyer and an older retired police detective who's retired from the NYPD, who becomes sort of his mentor, and it's kind of a fun murder mystery, political mystery type book. And so, to be blunt, we're trying to sell it. We're looking for a publisher for that who does that kind of books. And so I'm working on the sequel to that. Then I'm going back and I'm going to write the book after Enemies Among Us in that series. So I've got my hands full, but it's fun.
You sure do have your hands full. Jeffrey, where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about all of your books and be part of your community?
Well, thank you so much. The easiest thing to do, my website is my name, and Stevens is with a PH, so it's jeffreystevens.com, STEPHENS. You could contact me directly through my website. You could see all of the books that I've come out with right up to Enemies Among Us. You could see some of my other interviews and things on TV. You could look at my ugly mug or whatever, if that's your pleasure, or some of the radio interviews that I've done. And the book, obviously, is available. The easiest place to get it is the 800-pound gorilla known as Amazon, and they're terrific to me. I mean, they promote the book, and I think it's even on the hardcover is on sale now. And I also like to support independent bookstores. So if your local bookstore doesn't have it, they can order it for you, and you'll get it in no time, or Barnes & Noble and so on. So Enemies Among Us, I promise you, it is a fun ride, and you will really be engaged by the characters because it really speaks to people about what's going on in the world, and it's engaging and it's a page turner.
It definitely is. It's a book you won't want to put down. Well, Jeffrey, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thank you, Marianne. Thank you to all of your listeners who put up with all my silly stories. But I hope you go out and get the book, and I hope I hear from you. Let me know what you think, good or bad. I love to know.
Well, thank you, Jeffrey. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Enemies Among Us, a Nick Reagan Thriller. Enemies Among Us is available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And remember, support our indie bookstores. If you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.